Hey everyone, this is James from TDB bringing you another Inbetweenisode. Today actually is going to be a non-drinking Inbetweenisode, but I want to drink some tea, so I'm having a couple things while I record this. Drinking the 504-7542, which I recorded fairly recently, made that episode just 20 minutes ago, so we'll be kind of drinking that as I go, as well as a tea that might be a little more pertinent to the session, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. The best taste from Yeon, which is absolutely a daily drinker in my eyes. So we're going to be talking a bit about daily drinkers, what makes them, and in my opinion, one of the real killers of that prevents a tea from actually becoming a good daily drinker. I don't think of daily drinker as a negative term. I filmed an episode on this maybe 5 or 6 months ago, so half a year ago, where I drank some Peksin Chun tea, a tea shop over in Singapore. Talked a bit about why those teas would fit kind of like a good sort of daily diet. Of course, daily drinkers, as I said in that episode, I'm sure it's a very personal choice. What's a daily drinker for one person? Even if you agree with how they assess the value, might not be a good daily drinker for you for a number of reasons. So I think in terms of what can really kill a daily drinker are value, of course. If a tea is very expensive, it's very difficult to justify it kind of being a daily drinker. I think you want something that's usually not, you don't have to try too hard to think about or whichever. And if you are buying really expensive tea that is kind of painful for you to buy, for me at least, that just doesn't, that could be an automatic disqualification as a daily drinker goes. Another thing is just if it's too strong. I think if you are, if it's something where you have a headache or you have to build your day around the tea in a way, and I think there are a lot of teas that fit into that category that are good and enjoyable, but for me at least that disqualifies it. A good example of this would be something like this 504-7542. This tea very well eventually could kind of mellow out to the point where it's something that you can have a little more regularly, but to me at least it doesn't fit kind of a good daily drinker category in a way that like something like maybe an 8-5-8-2 for myself would, where the tea is a little bit more mellowed out and it doesn't feel like you need to kind of make sure your stomach's full, completely full before digging in. And perhaps the last reason, and I think I neglected to mention this in the Peksin Chun video, but perhaps the most important is if the tea is too boring. And I think this is really what differentiates and what can strike some people as a good daily drinker and not others. And I recently thought of this when I was having a conversation with one of my tea friends, Benoit, online, and he and I were talking about it, and there was a aged oolong, a very ordinary, not terribly special aged oolong, that I found to be very much hitting the spot and something that I could have normally, whereas he found the tea to be very boring. I don't think these assessments are necessarily incompatible with each other so much as they speak more to our personal preferences. Since then, I've bought that tea and have had it fairly regularly, and so for me, it's lived up to what I wanted the tea to be. So what's boring to one person might not be to another. And so, this tea, which I'm about to brew, the best taste from Yeon tea, very much a daily drinker. So much so that, I have bought, I'm not sure, but I brought probably easily over 1 kilogram of it. I store it in this big old mylar. It's over here. And it's just ready for immediate consumption. It's definitely a tea that I'll probably be having at least once, if not twice, 2 or 3 times a week. And it's just like a very nice daily drinker ripe, and one that when I do run out of it, I do intend to likely restock. And for me, at least, the traditional storage of it helps to make it more interesting than something like a ripe, or a kind of a more ordinary ripe that, I'll drink through that. Perhaps those qualify as daily drinkers. They're not quite the ultimate daily drinker for me that something like this is, where I'm pretty committed to having something of kind of like this quality and storage around permanently if I can manage it. And of course, the price is not too crazy at all. And it's also ripe, so inherently it's not too strong. And I think that's a big, the not too strong part, I do think is a big reason why ripe often does make a pretty solid daily drinker, because it's smooth, it's very forgiving, and you don't have to try too hard. and is very rarely too expensive. So the one thing that you're going to be running across a lot on Ripe, and I think this is why Ripe probably doesn't quite make it into other people's daily drinker list, is perhaps it is too boring. And so having that traditional storage element to it really helps in that aspect for me. And so having that really makes the tea a lot less boring. And it's a fairly consistently interesting tea. Perhaps I would get bored of it if I was having it every day, which is why I only have it maybe 2 or 3 times at most a week. But under those circumstances, I've been drinking it fairly regularly for probably 2 years now. So, and I still really like it. It's still definitely one of like kind of my favorite Ripes that I'm able to fit in on kind of a regular basis. And one reason that one thing I would also know, especially if you are a newer drinker or you've just recently got into tea as a hobby, is it's hard to know exactly where your tastes are going to settle and where you're going to end up lying on these sort of 3 criteria of value, too strong, or boring. When you're starting out, you're just in a very different phase. And I feel like most people, certainly those that end up watching these videos, these niche videos on YouTube, are kind of still figuring out their taste. And they're very much in kind of an exploratory phase where you're just looking for very, very different things. So things like, for me in my young exploratory phase, I drank a lot more Young Raw. I drank a lot more... let's see, what else did I have? Green tea is something that has never fit into kind of a daily tea. And things like Ripe actually seemed way too boring to incorporate into my diet. But it's sort of like one of those things where you're first getting started out, you'll like Ripe and stuff like that. Then when you're kind of middle and you think you know better, you kind of write it off. But at the end, when you have been drinking for a number of years, you'll end up gravitating back towards it because, it's just such a pleasant, easy drink that's great value. And if you can find something that isn't boring, then it really can kind of meet this perfect intersection to make a very nice daily drinker. So here. Yeah, just love that traditional storage, kind of making this like very traditional Chinese medicine, herbal, ginseng sort of broth to it. I know it's not for everyone, but for me, it really, really does hit the spot and just is the sort of drink that I can have pretty much any time. So when I'm traveling, I am often traveling, not necessarily with best taste because it's loose, but with a like purple yuan cake, something like that, just because it's like just very, very smooth and easy to go down. And for me, at least, it just feels, it's like comfort food in the morning when I'm having that tea after breakfast or something like that. And last thing I want to mention, just because I think it's a super important concept for daily drinkers, is the speed test, which is a kind of term that I believe Marshall coined. You read his article on that, and it's one of those posts that you would think is a fairly, not super important one, but it's really kind of a great rule of thumb and just a very simple test to see what actually will pass the test as far as being a daily drinker. It's just, you have it on your shelf, how often do you reach for it? You might think a tea in theory is great to have around and you're going to have it all the time, but that's not necessarily the case. Perhaps your tea drinking diet itself is kind of like the ultimate test. Are you reaching for that tea, or do you want to drink something else? If you want to drink something else, maybe you're better off not buying the tea in a way that you would, in the quantity that you would otherwise. Okay, well, I think that's just about it. Let me know what your guys' favorite daily drinkers are. For me, at least, my daily drinkers are kind of Ripe such as this, and raw pours that are probably a little more mellow than something like this 504 7542, as well as kind of like an array of oolongs, so stuff like Wui oolong from Wui origin, some high mountain Taiwanese oolong, things like that. So yeah, those are the teas that I am drinking on the regular. So thank you everyone again for tuning in, and I will see y'all next time. Cheers.